I realized that every time I was buying a watch, somehow got into this arena of like, this is gonna give me some satisfaction for a short amount of time. It'll look good, people comment on it and say like, oh, well, he must be doing really well.
Only 25% of them are very happy.
Professor of feeling.
The happiest people who have the happiness practices in abundance really are enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. Those are the three things we need in balance and abundance. The way that we get them is through practices. Humans are the only species that we know of that has time travel capabilities. It's so unbelievably powerful that most people spend most of their time not in the present, and that's a problem.
I'm confused by the reverse bucket list, because a bucket list is typically, I want to do these 50 things before I die.
Right.
Cross them out one at a time as they get done.
The reverse bucket list is to write down your cravings and desires. You write them down and you cross them out now. Even though you don't have them, you say to yourself, I will manage this attachment.
I'm having a really shitty day. Is there any go-tos that you have? Knock myself loose a little bit here.
I recommend...
Arthur, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, so glad to finally have you out here, and you flew out to LA today, and thanks for making time.
I'm super happy to be here.
Nice watch, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a Hoyer Monaco.
Yeah, I know.
Do you like the Monaco?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great watch.
Steve McQueen, Le Mans, 1968,
yeah,
right?
It's so good.
Yeah, totally.
I used to be the CEO over at Hodinky, the watch blog website that covers all things.
You were the CEO of Hodinky?
Yeah. So,
are you kidding?
Yeah, I was over there and helped Ben, the founder, take it from, we were 4 people and now we're over 100 people now. But I just helped him scale it up. And he just wasn't a tech guy, he was a watch guy and ex-banker. And so we just basically built up all the infrastructure on the back end, introduced e-commerce, brought on brands like Tag and others. I think they're authorized reseller for 20 some watch brands now.
It's a famous company.
Help grow that business. Yeah, so that was fun.
Did you learn about watches or did you already know about watches?
I was into them a little bit, enough to be dangerous, but honestly, I made some really bad decisions on the purchasing side, just buying
stuff that was stupid expensive and not that great.
Just like stuff that I was buying, I didn't really know what kind of collector I wanted to be. And so I would just go in and I would just buy like a Panerai or something. I was just buying like whatever I saw that was like had a big, nice boutique and treated me well, versus just like really going in and also I would just flip things very fast. And it would be fun to get into the happiness behind all this stuff. But like one of the things that I realized is that there just wasn't a lot, unless I had, and I still have a handful of watches, but I sold the vast majority of stuff that I had watch-wise. And I realized that every time I was buying a watch, it somehow got into this arena of like, this is going to give me some satisfaction for a short amount of time. And it'll look good. People comment on it and say like, oh, well, he must be doing really well. He's got, Paul Newman Daytona or something, and it's like, I would have these amazing watches.
It's a sweet watch, by the way.
It's a sweet watch.
Have one?
I did, yeah. And it was a bummer because I paid a lot less than what they're worth now, and to watch it appreciate. And I was like, damn it, why did I sell that? But anyway, it was one of those things where I just realized like there's no amount of watches I could own that would give me peace.
We can talk about that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of literature on that.
Yeah.
There's a huge
I've done that with cars
psychology
too.
and neuroscience of that. Cars, you're in a different league because there's no limit.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of there's no limit on watches too, but a Daytona, a Rolex Daytona is $25,000, something like that.
Yeah.
The equivalent in cars is $500,000.
Yeah.
And once you get into
that. Well, Paul Newman Daytona is now at least, I think they're around 300,000 plus.
What?
For the old Paul Newmans, the old ones.
This is a classic watch, not a new.
Right. The new Daytonas are a lot less expensive. Yeah. So it's ridiculous. But here's the thing, though.
But there's a reason you can't get satisfaction from that. There's a biological reason that you want to and can't get it.
Why is that?
So Mother Nature wants you to think that if you get the satisfaction from making that particular earthly reward, that you're going to enjoy it forever. Why? Because Mother Nature has only 2 goals for you, which is survival and passing on your genes. And the way that you do that is by rising in the hierarchy. That's how you do it. And the way that you rise in the hierarchy is by demonstrating to the other members of your tribe that you have resources to burn.
Right.
How do you do that? By having 6 watches instead of 1 watch, having more animal skins and more flints and buffalo jerky in your cave. That's what it comes down to. So Mother Nature says if you get that, it's going to be sweet and you're going to enjoy it forever. Now, you can't enjoy it forever because you won't be ready for the next set of circumstances. You won't be emotionally prepared, or you won't be in a frame of mind where fresh emotions can overtake you, good or bad, positive or negative, and you'll be eaten by a tiger immediately. Right. And so you have to get it and say, it's great, next.
Right.
That's called the hedonic treadmill. Your brain resets. That's called homeostasis, taking you back to emotional and physical equilibrium. And the fact that you don't understand that keeps you running and running and running. Next watch, next watch. That's called the hedonic treadmill.
So why is it resetting though? Why isn't there some kind of like sense of lasting
satiation?
Yeah.
No, it can't, because if you have satiation, then you'll be satisfied and you won't be in the hunt anymore.
Right.
And Mother Nature, basically the fitness that came, your ancestors made it past the Pleistocene because they were the ones who stayed in the hunt. The ones who achieved satiation didn't pass on their genes. The ones who were never satisfied were the ones who were more successful, got more resources, rose more in the hierarchy, had more mates, and that created you. And so that's why we've selected on that characteristic of always thinking that we're going to be satisfied and never being satisfied and never figuring it out. Now there's a hack to that matrix. So there's a way that we can get around that. And I'm not worried about you, suddenly not passing on your genes by knowing this hack.
Yeah.
Because you already passed on your genes, so you might as well know the secret, right? Mother Nature says that you will be satisfied when you have more. Haves. More. That's it. And so more what? More money, more power, more pleasure, more fame, more Instagram followers, more admiration from other people, more. Right? Real satisfaction is all your haves divided by your wants. Haves divided by wants. You need to focus on the denominator, not the numerator. In other words, you'll always manage your haves, and you'll do things where you have more, and it's the natural state of things. But if that's all you're doing, your wants will outstrip your haves, and your satisfaction will fall, paradoxically. It's like, I have more. My life is better. How come I feel worse? The reason is because your wants are getting bigger and you're not paying attention to the denominator.
Right.
A denominator strategy, look, you and I both studied math. We know that if you have a fraction, it's inefficient for you to focus on the numerator. It's incredibly efficient to focus on the denominator, to increase the number. And so if you can actually want less, you can stay almost permanently satisfied. That is one of the secret insights of Buddhism, of course, is wants management. And it actually that is the cheat code in the hedonic treadmill. That's actually how it works. It's like, and so how do you do it? Don't have a bucket list, have a reverse bucket list, where you make a list of all your worldly desires and cravings, and you write them down and you cross them out. Not because you're not going to get those things, but because you're not going to be attached to those things. They're not going to be in your limbic system. They're going to be transferred to the prefrontal cortex of your brain, where you can manage those desires. It's totally life-changing if you start using these techniques.
Wait, so tell me, I'm confused by the reverse bucket list, because a bucket list is typically, I want to do these 50 things before I die.
Right.
Cross them out one at a time as they get done.
You cross them out when they get done, and you imagine yourself doing these things, which is supposed to fire you up and motivate you.
Right.
But what it really does, among other things, is it makes you feel inadequate right now, and you're using the inadequacy of the moment to propel you toward greater things in the future. That's a hell of a way to live.
Yeah.
Right? That's just ridiculous, quite frankly. The reverse bucket list is to write down, honestly, your cravings and desires. I mean, you and I have been very fortunate in our lives, but we still have them.
Yeah.
We still have them. You write them down and you cross them out now, even though you don't have them, such that you say to yourself, I will manage this craving. I will manage this attachment. Now, that's the first noble truth of Buddhism, which is that life is dukkha, dissatisfaction. Really, I mean, it's life is suffering, but it's really dissatisfaction. Now, the reason for that is attachment. That's a second law, second noble truth. The third is that the cessation of suffering is detachment. And the fourth noble truth is the eightfold path of Buddhism, which is where it gets complicated. But if you want to cut to the chase, the eightfold path is managing your wants, not your needs. Sorry, not your haves. And that's what we're talking about. And we can all do that by paying more attention.
That's amazing. That's the name of my media company that owns the podcast is called Eightfold Media. I don't have the tools to do this because I just do it based on what I read and just naturally forcing myself not to participate. So like, if there is a shiny object and I say, hey, that looks great. That's a nice sports car. That's a nice watch, whatever it may be. I will say, well, nothing about that is going to give me satisfaction. Like I've told myself this. And then I tend to just say, if you still want it in X number of days, let's revisit the conversation, but let's park it for now. And almost like sure as shit, like 2-3 weeks go by and that excitement, it's worn off. Is that a sound strategy?
No, that's a very sound strategy, because basically what you're doing is the space that you're putting in there is you're managing your brain chemistry. So the lie that's actually happening is that you're getting anticipation of reward. So for a beautiful thing that you see, it increases your dopamine.
Right.
Dopamine is, being sprayed through the locus ceruleus into your prefrontal cortex, saying, man, I want that Paul Newman Daytona circa 1975. I want it because it's so beautiful. And I can get it if I want it, right? But what's going on is that the anticipation of the reward is managing you. That's how dopamine works. All addictive behavior comes from this. And so if you can basically put time between you and the purchase, then the dopamine will die back because you can't maintain that anticipation indefinitely.
Right.
Then you can actually start making a more rational decision. You're not owned by the dopamine. You're managing your desires so they don't manage you.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. That's a very sound strategy.
Okay, great. Today's sponsor is NordVPN. Stay secure and anonymous online with NordVPN, which has been my trusted VPN for years now. I like it because you can access geolocked content from anywhere. So I'm in Japan or Mexico at least a couple times a year, and I want to watch my favorite shows. And this comes in really handy to bypass all of that geofencing, and it needs to be fast. This is another essential thing for a VPN, and Nord is lightning fast because they have thousands of servers. So if you want to stream and game without lag, it's great. And then equally as important is privacy. They have a great policy, no logs, nothing to store, nothing to see, nothing to share, which is pretty much as good as it gets. And their apps are just really lightweight, so it's not bogging down your system the entire time, and they have it for desktop and mobile. Don't miss this incredible deal, which is 2 years at a huge discount plus 4 free months if you use my link, nordvpn.com/KevinRose. That's nordvpn.com/KevinRose, and it's risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, which makes this a no-brainer. So I'm absolutely addicted to rucking. That's where you put this weighted backpack on. I'm doing 4 miles probably 5 times a week. I actually saw a rattlesnake eat a lizard the other day. No joke, it was insane. Anyway, at the end of these workouts, as you can imagine, I'm just sweating a ton. It's great cardio, but I need to replenish my electrolytes. But sadly, most of those replacement powders out there, they're just packed with sugar that goes straight to your gut, spikes your glucose. There's nothing good about that. And that's the reason why I use Element. There's no sugar, and it has the science-backed ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. Not only no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, but there's no gluten, no fillers, just no BS. And I gotta say, new product alert, Element has just released Element Sparkling. It's the same zero sugar electrolyte formulation that you know and trust, but now in 16-ounce cans of sparkling water. And right now, Element is offering a free sample pack with any drink mix purchase. That's 8 single-serving packets free with any Element drink mix order. This is a great way to try out all 8 different flavors and see which one you like. The deal is only available through my link. You must go to kevinrose.com/LMNT. And lastly, and this is the best part, it's totally risk-free. So if you don't like it, you can just share it with a salty friend. They'll give you your money back. No questions asked. You have nothing to lose. Huge thanks to Element for sponsoring today's show. What have you learned? And are you an active, what's your connection with the Dalai Lama? And are you an active Buddhist? Or
I'm not. I'm a Christian. I'm a Catholic. I go to Mass every day.
Amazing. Wow.
So I'm serious about my Catholic faith. This is the center of my life, literally. But I'm very interested in how other people practice, and I've learned a tremendous amount from the Tibetan Buddhists. So I've had an active alliance with the Dalai Lama for the last 11 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I've been to his home in Dharamsala in India, where he has his monastery in the Himalayan foothills. He doesn't travel anymore. He used to travel a lot. So I've hosted him in the United States a lot. But now my lab, I take my lab, the scholars from my lab and the donors to my lab at Harvard to Dharamsala, and the two of us, the Dalai Lama and I, we co-host a summit. This year it's on Transcendence. I'm going, tomorrow, the day after we tape this episode, I'm going to go see him. And he's taught me a tremendous amount about my faith. He's brought me to transcendence in ways that no Catholic priest ever has. Now, I'm still a Catholic, and he tells me, the Dalai Lama has said, I want you to be a better Catholic, which is incredibly important because he says that that's my path up the mountain. He also believes that we've known each other for many lifetimes, which is kind of amazing to me. It's a totally different mindset.
How do you right side that with your faith, though?
Well, It's Christians don't believe that we're in samsara and the endless cycle of birth and rebirth, but we do believe in eternal life and life now and life in the hereafter, and the form that takes is immaterial. I mean, the whole idea that there's eternal life, but it's blocked up into different segments in different ways. I mean, that's a kind of a detail. Mm-hmm. It's above my pay grade to understand what the units are. Yeah. But we both believe that there is eternal life, that there's a cosmic consciousness, that we go on for, forever, basically. I mean, the Buddhists are a little bit different than the Hindus. The Hindus will believe in the Godhead and that the soul of the human passes from life to life and then is vacuumed up back into the Godhead when finally there's enlightenment. The Buddhists are non-theistic. So they believe that there's a subtle wind that takes the life force from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. And then finally, samsara can reach cessation when we have a bodhisattva nature, when we become, when we have a Buddha nature. Right. And the goal, paradoxically, for a lot of Christians like me, is to stay dead. My goal is to stay alive forever. And the Dalai Lama's goal is to kind of, for Buddhists, end it. So therein is the actual the dilemma. Yeah. That's a real difference. Right. The nature of eternity is not a real difference. The real difference is dead or not dead. What's the goal? Yeah. Well, I mean, their belief around emptiness and all of that is just absolutely fascinating. Oh, it's super interesting. And I just use it all the time in my own personal faith practice, but also in the science that I study, in the neuroscience and social science of happiness. I'm using Buddhist doctrine all the time. And the reason is because that's where you get the best questions. Then we can expose to scientific scrutiny, we can experiment on using psychological experimental methods, and then we can apply to ourselves by changing our habits. But all of the interesting questions are coming from, Aristotle and the Buddha and Jesus Christ and, all the way up through the existentialists and Schopenhauer and, and your grandma. That's where the interesting questions come from. Yeah, that's amazing. That must be so much fun to get out there. What's the transcendence piece of it? I missed that connection. So transcendence is the idea of transcending the psychodrama of your ordinary life. And this is what faith brings you. So faith is one of the great four practices of the happiest people. So the happiest people who have the happiness practices in abundance. And the happiness practices the happiness macronutrients really are enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. Those are the three things we need in balance and abundance. The way that we get them is through practices. And the most important practices that work for the most people most of the time and soak up most of the happiness that we can get are faith, family, friendship, and work. Faith, I don't mean the Catholic faith. I don't mean my faith. Right. I mean, I love it. But as a scientist, I will tell you that there's the happiness benefits come from many, many different ways of getting above yourself. Here's the thing. Mother Nature says, you're the star of your psychodrama. It's like, it's just all you, man. Right. My job, my car, my money, my lunch, my television program. It's just so boring. It's just so tedious, and you'll go mad because that's all you think about. For you to have proper peace and perspective and get the happiness that you want and need, you need to zoom out and get small. Mother Nature says, don't get small, but you must get small, which is the divine path of your life. The animal path is you're the star. Right. The divine path is no, I'm not. Right. And the only way you can do that is with a spiritual or philosophical practice. So the animal path is, obviously so essential because without it, we'd die. No, you die immediately. Yeah, you die immediately. You'd be hunted down. And so, but now that humanity has evolved to the point where, at least where we live today, we're not too concerned about that. Depends on what part of LA I'm in. But I will say that is now the time that you think that humanity needs to shift to kind of more divine focus? It's not a question of progress along the human continuum. There's never been a society in recorded history or even evidence before recorded history of any group of humans that were not spiritual, that didn't worship. It is our nature to worship. Now, some people say it's some weird artifact. It's the fact that the prefrontal cortex got so big. It's 30% of our brains by weight. There's no other species that even comes close to having this amount. We have consciousness because of the prefrontal cortex. It's like, I am me. My dog can't think that way. Right. I'm going to die. My dog can't think that. I'm aware of being aware. That's metacognition. No other animal can do that. But that also brings misery because it makes me say, I'm going to die. Why? Why exactly?
Yeah.
And what happens after that?
Right.
And, if I can't conceive of dying, I can't conceive of these metaphysical questions. And so some neuroscientists and philosophers will say, well, that's not evidence of God. That's evidence that our prefrontal cortex is posing questions that we can't answer. And so therefore we hunger for something that's beyond our intelligence, which makes us religious. I don't know, but I do know that human beings are built to worship. If that's the case, then you're not going to be satisfied unless you have some sense of the transcendent, something that's actually bigger than you that you can focus on, that puts your life into proper perspective, which is not my lunch is the most important thing in the entire world. Yeah. That's absurd on its face. Yeah. There are things that are way more important than that, and everybody agrees on it, but you got to have a technique to get there. Maybe it's Ryan Holiday, right?
Yeah.
He's awesome.
He's awesome. He's amazing.
Awesome.
What he's done for Stoicism is second to none. It's insane.
And, studying the Stoic philosophers with seriousness, that's a form of transcendence. Yeah. Walking in nature for an hour before dawn, Brahma Muhurta, in the ancient Sanskrit idea of the creator's time without devices.
I got to write that down. I got to do that. 1 hour before sunrise.
Yeah, I recommend to everybody that they get up an hour and a half before sunrise.
Okay.
Just always get up an hour and a half before sunrise.
That sounds glorious.
Oh, it's hard. It's hard.
I bet.
It hurts. It actually physically hurts.
Well, that's just because we're getting old.
Yeah. I'm getting old, brother. You look like a kid to me.
I'm in my late 40s now, and I will have injuries from sleeping. Yeah. I'm at the age now where you wake up and you're like, how the fuck? I just did what I do, and you're like, oh, I slept.
Yeah, I slept. Yeah. I slept wrong. I slept with one leg twisted. Yeah. So, but the Brahma Muhurta it's almost like magic. And if there's one thing, so I teach a lot of 20-somethings, and a lot of the guys say, okay, Professor, how do you start the day? This is a question I get constantly. Yeah. How do you start the day? And so I actually have a protocol that I recommend to people when they don't have a sophisticated Huberman, run toward the sun in a body of water and all the sophisticated stuff. Not making light of Huberman, he's a genius. But what I recommend is that you get up an hour and a half before dawn, you walk for an hour outside in the cold and dark with no devices and nothing in your ears. Wow. And you're listening to the crunch of your feet on the sidewalk or in the woods or wherever you get to walk. It doesn't matter where you walk someplace by yourself and focus on whatever is around you, listening and experiencing that for an hour. Because what that does is it combines the ambulation, actually will combine activity, movement, which is incredibly important, with your soul, with the faculties that are actually trying to get you in touch with what's going on between your ears and what's going on with your heartbeat and your respiration. And that is a body and soul kind of technique that will get you started. That's what I recommend. Before any of the psychostimulants, before any of the devices, before any of the craziness.
No caffeine.
Before that, no way. You wouldn't want to wreck your walk with caffeine.
How's it going to wreck my walk? It'll just give me that extra little boost.
Yeah, no. You need to be all you. It's all you. There's nothing between you and the walk. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
The other thing, just as a practical matter, your blood cortisol levels actually are kind of spiking an hour or so after you wake up. Not right when you wake up. Your cortisol levels are rising, which is your natural alarm clock when melatonin and cortisol levels cross. And that will wake you up in the morning. If you're waking up with an alarm clock, ordinarily it's going to be later than that your blood cortisol levels are really spiking. Yeah. You don't want to put turpentine on that fire, which is one of the reasons that people feel just so crummy and grumpy, like an hour or two angry, like when they first get to work, is because they woke up with an alarm clock and poured coffee down their gullet. And what that did was that when their cortisol was peaking, they also had 450 milligrams of caffeine in their system. And instead of being awake, they were just pissed. Right. And so that's not what I recommend.
Are you doing caffeine at all?
I do a lot of caffeine.
So what time do you
after I get back? So usually 120 minutes after I wake up.
Okay.
And there's the whole thing about trying to clear adenosine naturally. Most likely, the reason that it's so much better for me and it avoids the crash is because I'm not coinciding the peak of my cortisol levels with my caffeine consumption. My cortisol peaks before I actually take my caffeine. And then it also encourages the most dopamine in my prefrontal cortex. So I get 3 uninterrupted hours in the morning of actual creativity.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Then you got to block out the world. That means no phone calls, no Zoom. Zoom is is a killer for creativity. Nobody gets into that time. So you can get your 3 hours. And in that 3 hours, if you set it up body and soul and using the psychostimulants properly, that 3 hours will be like everybody else's 12-hour days.
Crazy. This episode is brought to you by Manscaped. It's that time of year. It's Father's Day time. It's time to help dad beat back that 70s overgrowth vibe with products from Manscaped. Manscaped, in my opinion, has the best beard razor on the market. It's called the Beard Hedger. It has 20 different length adjustments with this little zoom wheel that I use. And it always keeps my beard at just like the perfect length. I don't want to mention any other brands, but I was a junkie in this arena. I tried like 20 different beard trimmers. And by far and away, this is the best. It's the easiest to clean. It's also waterproof. I also travel a ton, so the fact that it's USB-C, it works with all my other chargers. I don't have to think about it. And it has a really super compact case. They also have a more sensitive product called the Lawnmower Razor. It's also fantastic, but largely because you can trim those special areas and it doesn't cut you. They have something called the Skin Safe Blade. So give your dad the gift of a fresh spring cut, a sense of lightness, just a sense of flow. 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's nothing to lose here. Head on over to manscaped.com and use the code KevinRose for 20% off plus free shipping. Happy Father's Day. When I'm starting a new company or advising a company, it's absolutely essential to have what I call a single source of truth, meaning if you need to know something, the status of something, you need to see a product requirements doc, you need to comment on a design or hash out a new feature, having one tool, one source is essential to my sanity. Otherwise, I'm looking all over the place and I can't find something. So for me, that tool is today's sponsor, Notion. Notion is awesome because it combines your notes, your docs, and your projects into one space that's simple and beautifully designed. And the fully integrated Notion AI helps you work faster, write better, and think bigger, doing tasks that normally take you hours in just seconds. You don't have to go to an external AI provider. It's all baked in. So no doubt you've heard of Notion, but have you tried it yet? If you haven't, you got to give it a shot, especially the AI stuff. It's really cool. Head on over to notion.com/KevinRose to try the powerful, easy to use Notion AI today. And I know you could just go to notion.com, but if you throw a /KevinRose at the end, that really supports our show. What I do now, I'd love to see how this fits into your regimen if you've tried it at all. I wake up and I'm doing it all wrong. I get that now. I wake up and I go downstairs. I have a cup of coffee. Right. It's typically pretty early, call it like 7 a.m. because I got a couple kiddos that get up around that time. Right. And then after that cup of coffee, rather than hitting that second cup of coffee, I jump in the cold plunge.
You'd like the cold plunge?
Yeah, I do cold plunge for 3 minutes, and then I jump into hot. Basically, I have a little jacuzzi that's hot, and I jump in there, do the contrast, and I don't need another cup of coffee. Like, I am wired.
Oh, yeah, because your dopamine is going burn.
It's kind of crazy. Do you do cold plunge or sauna at all?
I mean, I like sauna a lot. I don't do cold plunge regularly, and I have questions that we don't know yet because we don't have a whole lot of research on this yet. I have questions about whether or not spiking your stress hormones is going to have long-term impact. I'm not saying that it is. I just don't know yet at this particular point. I do know that the research is really thorough on sauna, and sauna's great. Sauna's great.
Yeah, I mean, sauna just across the board, reduction in all-cause mortality, like the cardiovascular benefits, dementia reduction, like it's just insane. Like,
it's for sure. Great. I mean, and that's so well studied. And at some point, my guess is that in the coming years, we'll know enough about cold plunge that I'll be a lot more comfortable.
Just got to watch Wim Hof and see how he does as he gets older. He's been at the cold plunge for a while now.
Yeah, and again, I have a lot of friends and a lot of colleagues who actually are total disciples of it, and they think I'm missing the boat. Maybe they're right.
But it's interesting because I had read a piece of data that I saw. I can't remember what study it was, but it said that people that do extensive cold plunge, it can obviously reduce inflammation.
Right.
But there was something about it blunting the effects of inflammation afterwards in terms of reducing your body's natural ability to reduce its own inflammation. So you kind of become dependent on the cold plunge.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That concerned me a little bit.
Well, it does make sense. It does make sense that you're actually using an outside stimulus to do something that your body does endogenously.
Right.
Exogenous will always trump endogenous in these physical functions. And the endogeneity is really important because your body takes care of itself.
Right.
And your body takes care of itself better than anyone else or anything else, typically. I mean, not always. I mean, you can malfunction, but so that doesn't surprise me very much. But again, it's all cost benefit.
Yeah.
It's cost benefit.
Yeah. I
for
mean,
you.
that's why I think like for me, I've kind of said no more than 3 minutes. I'm just going to I'm not going to do the 15 minute, and I'm going to reduce it down to, I get into the 40s, which is pretty cold.
That's
and
pretty cold.
It's pretty cold, but it gives me the proper wake up and I'll just keep paying attention to the data and see what happens with it.
You're into it. I mean, it's good. And the truth is we should always be experimenting on ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a really nice way to live. It's a fun way to live. I mean, that's living your life like a startup. Like the ultimate enterprise is you. And what do you do with your startup? You try this, and if it works, you keep it. If you don't, you do something else, and you have the spirit of the entrepreneur in your day-to-day life. That's a great way to live.
How much, I mean, you're clearly in really good shape. How much do you put into working out in terms of its impact on health and happiness?
Yeah.
Not so much health, we know that, but on the happiness side,
we sort of know about it. I mean, you can go too far with fitness, so it's actually not good for your health.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you can. I mean, I'm turning 60 this year, and if I'm trying to do, PRs on the bench press, I'm going to hurt my shoulders.
Right.
I mean, I have to have impeccable form, which I'm not going to all the time.
Right.
And so you can go too far on anything. It's all, you have to be moderate too, is what that comes down to. But on happiness, it's actually pretty clear. So I recommend to my students that hour walk and the Brahma Muhurta and all that. But when I get up at 4:45. That's my typical time to get up. I stretch and pray a little bit. At 5:15, I'm in the gym. I have a gym in my house like you do. I just saw it because it's next to your podcast studio.
That's right.
From 5:15 to 6:15, I'm mostly doing resistance training.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of, I'll do high intensity cardio 2 days a week for half of that time, for half of that hour.
Yeah.
Just making sure I'm getting 2 HIIT days into my schedule. And then the rest of the time is ambulation. So I'm walking approximately 10,000 steps, approximately 5 miles a day. I'm making
10,000 steps a day is what your kind of aim is?
Yeah, 5 miles more or less. I mean, it's arbitrary.
Yeah.
It's just, I know that I can get that in. And if I'm trying to do more than that, it'll take too much time.
Right.
But if I'm dropping too far below it, I'm not going to be active enough. So it's good to have this goal without being dogmatic about it.
Are you rucking at all?
No.
Okay.
I know. That's a good thing to do. And I probably should. I probably should do my Brahma Muhurta, pre-dawn walk. With
I was just going to ask you that because
a 75-pound pack.
Atia got me into that. You were on Atia's podcast, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Peter and I mean, that's like, he's great. He's been a huge influence on me for sure. So that's a great thing. And my son does a lot of that. I have a son who's a Marine.
That'll do it.
Yeah, he's a Marine sniper. So he's
wow. Oh my God.
He's hardcore. My son's hardcore. Yeah. And so he tries to get me into this type of stuff. So the point about that gets back to your question though. So I do that before I go to mass every day. So I go to mass at 6:45 in the morning, and then I'm drinking coffee and at my desk for my 3 solid hours of creative work by 7:30, and then nobody gets into that time.
What do you do at mass, by the way? I'm not a Catholic.
It's a Catholic mass, same thing every day.
Is it just prayer?
No. It's
talk?
tightly scripted.
Okay.
And so it's very different than a Protestant service, for example. It's not a prayer service at all. You go in and there's an opening prayer, there's readings from the Bible by lay people and then by a priest, and then it goes into the Eucharist, which is the sacrifice of the Mass, the sacrifice of communion. It takes half an hour. If you have a long-winded priest, it's like 40 minutes.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Yeah, if you've got somebody who's got, as we say, liturgical efficiency, it's more like 20 minutes. I love those guys.
Yeah.
But the whole point is that it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And it unites the rhythm of your soul with your heart and breath. And that actually will complete what you're actually trying to do before you start your day. And that's important. That I recommend that people who don't do this, that they meditate in the morning, that you have a practice. You have a contemplative practice that's repetitive and you can count on it and it's the same.
Yes.
That's really, really important. Now, the exercise piece is important for the happiness for a slightly different reason. When I talk to people who can't stay on an exercise regime, there's one thing that I know about all of them, which is that they don't have intense negative emotion. That's what they have. So there's 4 kinds of people with respect to emotional intensity. There's 4 emotional intensity profiles. People who are high positive, high negative. These are high affect people. This is you. So you're how do I know this? Because you're a super successful entrepreneur. They're all high affect people. This is the mad scientist profile.
Yeah. You talk about the mad scientist in your book. Right. Yeah.
There are people who are high positive, low negative.
You're a mad scientist too, right?
Super mad.
And then Oprah was something else.
She's a judge.
Judge, that's right.
She's a judge. And that's low. That's a low affect person. And that's really good if you're going to be like as significant as Oprah and be happy because you'll be able to, it's like her life is nuts.
Yeah.
And she has to be able to take it, right? If you're a mad scientist and get that famous, you're going to struggle because the intensity of your emotions, given the circumstances of your life, those 2 things will catalytically drive you mad. So, but if you're a judge like her, she can handle it. I mean, she's unbelievably happy in spite of this incredible fame that she has. If you're high positive, low negative, that's the cheerleader profile. If you're high negative, low positive, that's the poet profile.
Right.
And there's really interesting neuroscience about the poetic profile, about why they're so creative and why they struggle so much. I mean, why it's so hard. And so we can talk about that too. But if you have one of the two that has high negative affect, a poet or a mad scientist, you're going to stay in the gym because you're going to figure out intuitively that that's the best single way for you to manage your negative affect. Yeah. Negative affect is bad, is negative mood, negative emotion, intensity of negative emotion. You don't want to get rid of it. It keeps you alive. Yeah. I mean, that's how you survive is having aversive emotions in response to threatening conditions. Now, you don't want them as high as they are so they don't manage you. They don't make you nuts. And one of the best ways you can do that is vigorous exercise. The worst way you can deal with it is addiction. Yeah. And so people deal with it with alcohol. Yeah. I recommend not. If you're a mad scientist, I recommend not drinking. It's funny you mentioned that. I just recently gave up alcohol. It's great, isn't it?
I got to say, it's like there's 20% of like happiness just waiting for you if you could just give it up, that you just naturally get. There's a little bit more bounce in my step, just naturally.
The problem is that high negative affect people, they tend to have a lot of anxiety. Yes. Anxiety is nothing more than unfocused fear. So fear is a natural physiological reaction through the amygdala to aversive threatening conditions. When it's unfocused because your life is stressful, that'll be just a little drip of stress hormones into your brain. That lack of focus is what we call anxiety. The single best chemical way for you to manage it efficaciously in the short term is alcohol.
That's great.
It's unbelievable. It cuts the connection between your amygdala and your prefrontal cortex. It's unbelievable. So your amygdala can be like lighting up like a Christmas tree. Like, it's cool.
Yeah, I would have days where I would just go out and just like be heads down, stressed, juggling like 10 different employees and different things coming at me, life of a startup. Yeah. And then you get home and you're just like, oh, okay, what can I do here? And I would go and meditate, which is great, but it didn't really check the box. And then you go have a glass of wine or two and you're like, there we go.
2 martinis. And man, it just
martinis don't even bring up martinis. Those are fantastic.
Totally. And did you keep the gin bottle in the freezer? Make sure you didn't have to water it down at all?
No, I didn't do that. I wasn't that hardcore. But I would ask for extra shaken to get extra cold, dry gin martini.
Cold. You just basically said vermouth over the top. So you didn't have to
just spritz of vermouth and that's
So, but it's unbelievable how effective that is. Other people will do it with other kinds of distractions. So social media overconsumption is a classic way to manage your negative affect. People will use pornography to manage their negative affect, which is a dangerous and bad addiction that they have. So these addictive things, what they do is they distract you from your negative affect. And that's not a healthy way to deal with your negative affect because there's always a rebound. With alcohol in particular, you'll find that anxiety will rise even more than it fell the next day, and you get into the cycle. Right. And that's why people drink more and more and more and more, and it's especially prevalent among people who have high socioeconomic status. You're more likely to abuse alcohol if you're high income, high education. Most people don't know that because these are not people in the gutter. Right. But the more stress that you have, that you put yourself under voluntarily because you're a striver, the more likely you're going to drink alcohol abusively. The best way to deal with this is exercise. I mean, meditation and prayer, good. Right. But that's very low intensity. If you're lifting weights at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're going to be working on your negative affect, and your negative affect is going to be managed in a very healthy way. So, the people who are listening to us, because you've got a lot of people who want to be you, stop drinking, start lifting. Yeah. Is what it comes down to. Stop drinking at night, start lifting in the morning, and your life's going to change.
I used to try and do both.
Yeah, I know.
I used to try and lift and drink. Yeah. And then I'm just like, one of these has to go, and it's not going to be the lifting. Yeah. And I recently got a speed bag too. Have you ever tried a speed bag before?
No.
Oh,
for boxing.
It's so much fun. You can get them for a couple $100 off of Amazon, a really high quality one. You can pick up in about 3 days. And you'll just be going, and you're also using your non-dominant arm as well. So you're like creating new neural pathways there by using your non-dominant arm in a very like intensive way. And it's beautiful. It's just so much fun. And it's a great way to take your mind off of everything else, to decompress, to get a workout in, it's good for your shoulders.
I started lifting when I stopped drinking. My life got better. Yeah. My life got a lot better. There's no unintended secondary consequences unless you have bad lifting form. Yeah. Unless you're actually hurting yourself. And especially, don't do stupid things like performance enhancing drugs on your lifting. And it's like, no one cares. Right. The only the only compliments you'll get are from dudes.
Right. I've gotten that when I put on a few pounds. People are always like, oh, like it's mostly your guy friends. They're like, nice shoulders.
Your wife's like, whatever.
Yeah, she's like, I don't care.
Did you take out the trash?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And so that's where it comes in. The happiness that people say, I get a lot happier when I exercise. No, you get less unhappy when you exercise. And if you're naturally not very unhappy, you're going to struggle to stay in an exercise regime. That's why. And so you actually have to think about it in different protocols in different ways. And I usually recommend to people who don't have high negative affect and can't stay in the gym that they figure out something they'd like to do that's fun. You know, they're playing a sport, for example.
I see.
Because, you know, they're not going to, it's leg day. No way. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Can you talk about this idea that I see on social media a lot where there's this idea that essentially we should avoid ever being uncomfortable or sad, or like they think there's like happiness is a destination. Like it's like a thing that you will achieve one day and then you got it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's something to hold on to. Yeah. How do you think about that?
Well, it's insane, of course. It's an exercise in futility, and it's the recipe for frustration, because happiness is not something that you can or even should want to attain as a goal. Ultimate happiness would be the complete cessation of suffering. That was kind of what Epicurus wanted. Great Greek philosopher who, you know, of the Epicurean school. And that wasn't really about just Epicureanism. We think of cooking or something, or hedonism is not either of those things. It was to live with as little suffering as possible. That's not a good goal because it's an exercise in futility. You can't get that. To begin with, you need negative emotions to keep you alive. Negative emotions are your natural physiological set of reactions produced by the limbic system of your brain in response to aversive conditions. If a tiger's chasing you, you need fear.
Right.
If your wife is threatening to leave you, you need to be trying to avoid sadness. Right. You need that. Otherwise, you'd be alone and eaten, and you'd be wiped out immediately.
Yeah.
Your ancestors certainly would have made it, and neither would you. So you're not going to be able to avoid these things, and you shouldn't. And therefore, perfect happiness is impossible. Second, you're going to suffer through aversive circumstances. You're going to have setbacks. I mean, you're an entrepreneur. I have to tell you, you've suffered and been afraid about what was going to happen. And that's normal too, because that's how you learn and grew. Research from Northwestern often talks about this common stat that we throw around in business schools all the time, that the average successful entrepreneur has had about 4 unsuccessful attempts. Right? That's where they learned and grew. Well, the same thing is true in your love life. If you haven't had 4 ugly breakups, then you're not out there enough. You're not being entrepreneurial enough with your life, and you didn't learn enough. And that's the approach. You need to suffer. Your suffering is incredibly generative. It's unbelievably sacred. In my religion, suffering is central to being fully alive. And so this attitude that we have in the social media era of, if it's painful, make it stop. Right. That if I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling sad, there's something wrong with me. I'm defective. I have to have it treated. This is complete insanity. It's exactly like what the hippies used to say: if it feels good, do it. That's a perfect way to ruin your life. Then you're stuck limbically tapping the ventral tegmental area of your brain, the reward center. Tap, 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 tap. You'll just be a drug addict, pathetic, right? You're just kind of animal. That's no good. You don't want that. And the same thing is true if you're living not to suffer. If you're living not to feel pain, man, you got to be out there. You got to say, the goal shouldn't be, I'm not going to suffer today. Your goal should be opening up the day with, bring it on. Yeah. I'm going to love the good stuff, but I need the bad stuff. And one way or the other, I want it all, man. I want it all.
So how do you right size that with this idea of creating more happiness? It feels like we shouldn't want to create more happiness then. We should just be surrendered to the suffering, and then happiness happens? Like,
So the key thing to remember is that happiness requires and contains unhappiness. Right. This is the key thing. Great desserts have a lot of salt in them, right? And if you ever had a cookie where they forgot to put the salt in it, it doesn't taste right. Right. Because it doesn't have an adequate complexity of flavor. And much is the same thing with happiness. So happiness is really a combination of 3 macronutrients. So the protein, carbohydrates, and fat of happiness are enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. And all of those 3 things require suffering. Enjoyment is not pleasure. It's pleasure that requires sacrifice. It requires people plus memory. And that means that if you're doing something that's pleasurable and could be addictive and you're doing it alone, you're probably doing it wrong. You're probably following the animal path, not the truly human path. And that requires some sacrifice. That's a little bit of suffering. Satisfaction is the joy you get only after suffering, only after sacrificing. Humans are so funny. They want to work harder for what they get. If your startup success was sweet, in no small part because of the struggle.
Right.
You needed to struggle. That is an incredible paradox of human life. The more you struggle, the more you enjoy the reward. But the struggle is painful. The struggle is hard. And then last but not least is meaning. You only find meaning in life from your suffering. If I said, hey, man, how did you know your resilience and the meaning of your life? You'd be like, that week in the beach in Ibiza. No.
Right.
You'd tell me about
the grit,
losing your dad.
Yeah.
You'd tell me about somebody you loved rejecting you. You'd talk to me about losing a company that you thought was a big winner. You'd talk about feeling humiliated and surviving. That's the point.
Yeah.
If you try to avoid your unhappiness, paradoxically, you will be avoiding your happiness. And that's the reason, just like in any other startup endeavor, you got to say, I want it all, man. I want it all.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
That's interesting because it's like anytime I think about something that's just been handed to me,
Yeah.
I never really appreciate it. You don't have that same level of joy. It's the process. It's like the saying, like, trust the process. The going through that process. If you could just walk in and get a shot, actually, Ozempic's probably a good example of this. If you could just walk in and get those muscles just for doing nothing, you probably wouldn't have the same, like after a good workout, it's the fact that I went through that struggle to get to where I am that I feel better about the whole thing.
You notice why people who inherit a lot of money, they're very insecure.
Yeah.
They have been, very often in their families, they've been treated as kind of junior liabilities. And then, given a sense of outward markers of success without actually struggling to achieve something, without earning their success.
Lottery winners is probably in another.
Lottery winners and heirs, they're much the same thing. They're different socioeconomic classes typically, but there's no satisfaction that comes from that. And, this is what we want. Look, we back to your point of progress, we're mostly getting 3 squares in this country. It's an unbelievable fruit of the free enterprise system. It's something we should be really proud of. We're the most successful, progressive, upwardly mobile society in the history of planet Earth. But that doesn't mean we're happy yet.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is because we mistake the outward markers of success for the happiness that we think it will bring. Mother Nature says, if you get enough money, power, pleasure, fame, then you'll automatically be happy, because Mother Nature wants you to rise in the hierarchy with extra resources. We talked about a minute ago, right? That's not true. That isn't true. The truth of the matter is you have to go for what actually does bring happiness. The achievement that comes from earning your success and serving other people. The love that comes from struggling to build relationships that really matter with your family and your spouse and your children and your friends. And the path toward transcendence that you get by actually putting in the effort for these bigger things in life, these more metaphysical things in life. That's not what Mother Nature is telling you. But when you take that path, then life really starts to change. Then you're a lot more comfortable with your suffering because your suffering has meaning.
You said in an interview that since 1990, we are on this kind of path, and I don't know if you were just talking about the United States, but generally speaking, we're on this path of like less happiness. Yeah. Is that just U.S.? Is that U.S. data?
Those are U.S. data, but you find them in many other countries as well.
Okay.
Many other Western OECD countries as well.
The only thing, I'm old enough to remember 90. The only thing I can remember is the internet coming online around that time. Yeah. What's causing this?
So there are climate reasons and weather reasons. Obviously, I'm speaking metaphorically, as I'm not literally speaking about the climate. The climate reasons, the climate of happiness is degrading because of a fall in 4 phenomena: faith, family, friends, and work. So you find that people are less likely to be pursuing their spiritual, philosophical lives, way less. A lot of people say I'm spiritual but not religious. Often that means neither, right? It just means I don't want to pursue religion because it bums me out. There's lots of rules and one-sided conversations with God, and besides my parents did that or whatever. But they're not pursuing the transcendent. Fewer and fewer people are pursuing the transcendent. When I was born in the mid-'60s, 1% of Americans said they had no religious affiliation. Now it's 33%.
Wow.
Second is family life. People are way less likely to pair up, fall in love, have kids. They're less likely to do that. And you find dramatically, only about 45% of people in their 20s today say they ever are going to have kids. Now, many of them will revisit that when they fall in love and change their priorities, to be sure. But the longer you wait, the harder it gets. And so the result is people are less likely to form permanent romantic partnerships, and they're less likely to have children. And that lack of family life, it's just, the data are unambiguous. Families and kids, there's a huge source of frustration. I don't have to tell you, you got little kids. I got grown-up kids. My kids are in their 20s.
I was going to just ask you, tell me when it gets easier.
Big kids, big problems, but it's great. I'm a grandfather now.
That's amazing.
It's
Congratulations.
Great. Thank you. It's phenomenal. It's a game changer. And this is like the source of lightness in my life. It's also the source of great anxiety. But again, that's the point. It all comes as a package, a big, beautiful package. For the apple of my eye, my little grandson is also a source of anxiety. God forbid anything should happen to him. Yeah. And that bundle of intense emotion is one of the great sources of human happiness. And we have less of that because we're singletons. We're going through life as singletons. Third is friendship. More and more people say no one knows me well. About half of adults today say nobody knows me well. Think about this. This has doubled since 1990, and that's a loneliness epidemic. That's horrible.
Why is that? What has changed there?
Because we have deal friends, but not real friends.
What do you mean by, you said deal friends?
Yeah, deal friends.
What is a deal friend? Just using them for...
Deal friends are good to each other. They do like each other, but they don't know when each other's birthdays are. A real friend is useless. You just love them.
What changed, though?
What changed is that a lot of people are not living where they grew up. A lot of people have moved around, and they've moved around frequently. And it's hard to have real friends that you met last week.
That's a great point. It feels like it's harder as you get older to actually...
For sure.
Because I just moved to LA a year and a half ago, and somebody's asked me, who you hang out with? And I'm like...
My wife.
Yeah, my wife, my kids. I got a couple of buddies that live kind of across town. It takes a while to get to, but I need to make friends.
Yeah, totally. You need real friends.
Yeah,
you need somebody who you would say, you know what, you're useless to me. I just love you. I don't mean worthless. I have those people too.
Yeah,
and that's really, really important, and we find that. And then last but not least is a sense of vocation in our work, and more people have become persuaded that the measure of work is money. The measure of work is prestige. And that's not the measure of work. Certainly my father wouldn't have said that. My father, voluntarily took a job teaching at a small liberal arts college. My father was a brilliant mathematician. He wanted to teach at the college where he had gone. Despite the fact that we were a lower middle class family growing up in the North Queen Anne section of Seattle, living our lives, because that was super meaningful to him. He felt that was his holy vocation, was to teach math at the college that gave him his opportunities. That's just very infrequent. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You can say it's because of capitalism. No, it's because of culture.
Yeah.
Because we've moved away from it. Those are the four sources of climatic happiness malaise, to coin a phrase.
This is all great data. The vocation stuff is really fascinating, because one of the things that I really respect about Japan is just this idea that you can master a craft and become respected for something very small. Right. Something that you may not actually be earning a lot from, but you are have perfected this one thing.
You're dang good at it.
And people it was, it was interesting. Did you see that movie, the documentary? It's not a documentary, it's actually a movie, but it's about a Japanese toilet cleaner.
No, I didn't see that.
It's fantastic. So it's essentially this guy that, it's basically you're seeing about, a month of his life's work, and he cleans toilets in Japan, public toilets. And he cares so much about every little tiny edge and every crack. And, he's sitting there spending his life's work on this. And every time he goes to a restaurant, they know him, and they say, "For your work," and they hand him a beer. Out of respect, thank you for what you do, Yeah,
get into a taxi in Japan. They're literally wearing white gloves.
Yes.
Do not try to tip a taxi driver in Japan.
Exactly.
It's an insult. It's no, you pay me the price because I did the job. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And the whole point is that's my dad.
And that is your dad.
Yeah. And when it's funny, I've lived off and on in Barcelona for the past 35 years. I've been gone back and forth between Barcelona and the United States for the past 35 years. Barcelona is the place I know best on planet Earth. And you go to a restaurant, a good restaurant in Barcelona, the waiter is a pro. That's his vocation.
Yes.
It's you would even say, camarero de profesión. That means that's a waiter by profession.
Yes.
Not a waiter like until I get my first roll.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's not a temporary job because it's not a junk job at all. On the contrary. And you know, how much money do they make? I don't know. Wouldn't sound like a lot probably. But you know, I talked to a waiter one time. He says, yeah, you know, it's like I treat everybody the same. Guy comes in with his girlfriend, politician, big shot, president of the country, they all get the same because I'm a professional.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. And that sense of vocation is super important. We've lost that.
We've totally lost that. And I feel like social media is making it worse. It's just like pointing to like saying object, you need to make more, you need to be like this, you need to look like this. And it's really screwing up people.
Yeah. There's other things that are doing this too. I mean, it's like when politicians are telling us everybody has to go to college. That is insanity. Mm-hmm. This idea that you're worth less and the jobs that you can get are bad jobs if you don't go to college. Right. That's just fueling this fire of unhappiness.
Yes.
I mean, when I'm elected president of the United States, every junior in high school will have an internship in either a factory or a farm.
Yes.
And they're going to do blue collar work.
Yeah.
And they're going to respect blue collar work. And a bunch of them are going to be like, actually, I think I want to do blue collar work.
Yeah.
This is important stuff. I had a kid who went to Princeton. The second kid came along, didn't go to college, worked on a farm for a year and a half, made a bunch of money, then joined the Marine Corps. And he was a sniper in the Marine Corps. And he's a manager at a construction company, loves his job, super respected, making boatloads of dough. Why? Because he's good at what he does. Because he takes pride in what he does.
I
don't know what my little girl is going to do. And she's only 20. She turned 21 this month, but she's got good role models from both her brothers.
Yeah,
and they both really see their work vocationally, and I'm proud of that. It's critical.
I love that. I mean, one of the things I constantly think about is, you know, I got a couple little kids, and they're 6 and 5, and what I want for them more than anything else is I just call it to find their life's work. Like, how can they find the thing? And I don't care if they're the best barista and they own their own little coffee shop. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to push them into academia. My wife is much smarter than I am. She's got her PhD in neuroscience, and like, she knows that path is not she's been pushed on that path. Yeah. You know where that leads.
Totally.
I mean,
I'm a third generation academic.
Yeah,
I really know where that leads.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
When someone's listening to this podcast and they're like, well, great, I hear you on the job front, but they're not respected in the United States. There's no glory. I made breadsticks at Olive Garden. I can tell you firsthand, there was no glory in that position. Like, how can you find happiness if you're meant to be a waiter, but it's not respected?
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons that happiness is in decline, is because our culture is not valuing something like that.
Right.
Now, there are certain vocations that you can engage in that the culture doesn't say are valuable, that people take enormous satisfaction in. Landscapers take enormous satisfaction. Roofers, plumbers, electricians. If you talk to your plumber, he's going to be suspiciously happier with his job than you. He's going to be like, do you like being a plumber? I guarantee your plumber's like, totally. It's awesome.
Yeah.
They call me up, man, 11 o'clock at night. I fix their pipes. They're grateful. I'm making time and a half.
I feel that about all of the people that help me with things. Completely. Like when I have an electrician come and fix a problem, I'm like, thank you for your work.
Totally.
Like I couldn't have done that.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing what they do. Right?
Yes.
And that's so there's still vocations. There's still trades where these things are valued by the people. How long will it last? Well, it sort of depends. If we do the same stupid thing that we did with waiters, that we do with plumbers and roofers, then we're going to be, it's straight up elitism and discrimination, but it also is lowering our happiness. So that's the climate. But then there's storms. And this is where it gets scary. There's been 3 downdrafts in happiness over the past 25 years. The first was in 2008, 2009, 2010. And I'm trained as an economist, so I'm like, it's the financial crisis. No. That's when everybody was putting social media on their devices. Everybody was getting screens, everybody's getting personal devices, and social media was going on those devices. Jonathan Haidt, who's got this incredible new book out, huge bestseller, on the age of anxiety among young adults, the most anxious generation. He's talking about it every place. You can't listen to podcasts without listening to John Haidt. And this guy's a prophet. He's the closest thing you get to a biblical prophet in academia. He's always saying things that are going to happen 3 or 4 years. Anytime Jonathan Haidt says something, if he could pick stocks, right, it would be the most
best
amazing
advisor
thing.
ever. Yeah.
I just my respect and reverence for John Haidt has no bounds. And he's talking about how this phenomenon has just ravaged happiness, especially among young adults, especially among young women. Second is political polarization. And last but not least is the coronavirus epidemic, which tore us apart and we never got back together again. You know, it's like exacerbated loneliness. It poured gasoline on the fire of loneliness in this country. Loneliness is an incredible phenomenon neurobiologically. It has everything to do with a neuropeptide in the brain called oxytocin that most people have heard of. Oxytocin is a hormone that bonds us together to kin. We are evolved to be tropical, hierarchical, kin-based individuals.
This is what when women have just given birth, they get a lot of this.
They
right?
They bond with breastfeeding to the child. The father has a whole lot of oxytocin, not as much as the mother, about a quarter as much as the mother, but the father has an explosion of oxytocin. You remember when you first laid eyes on your newborn baby? Your first one is like the 4th of July in your head. I would die for this baby.
Oh my God, it's so crazy. You're just like, I don't know why, but if a bus came, I would jump in front of it.
That's right. And I would certainly not leave my kid on the bus by accident.
Right.
You know, that's oxytocin. And that's an unbelievable thing. You don't get it from Zoom. You don't get it by social media. And so when you have withdrawn yourself, if I could do one thing to make happiness higher in the United States, I would have more eye contact and touch. That's the one thing that I would do, because happiness is love. And love is instantiated through eye contact and touch. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot, relationships and understanding romance and real versus deal and all this kind of stuff. But just start with eye contact and touch.
Apple just added 3D avatars to their VR headset. So now you can see someone in 3D in front of you.
It'll help more. You
think so?
I think it'll help. I think it will help
the neurophysiology. Do you think we'd ever get there? Will we ever get to a VR state where I'm sitting across from you and it feels so real that we're actually getting the benefits?
No. You won't get you won't, because you'll always know. The problem is that you know. Look, we're having a good conversation right now in no small part because we're not on Zoom.
Right.
I mean, it's just completely different phenomenon. I do a lot of podcasts, and so do you do them by Zoom ever?
No, I try not to. I haven't done any yet. So in the past I've done a couple,
and they're just not great.
They just don't feel. You can't joke. You can't have the pre-conversation, post-conversation. There's a lot to love about in person.
There's no oxytocin.
Yeah.
There's no oxytocin, man. I mean, it's like we need that. I mean, we're becoming friends over the course of this conversation.
Yeah.
And that's life. That's super important. And a lot of people are way lonelier than they understand. They're binging on electronic means of communication, and they're binging on social media, which is like binging on fast food when you're hungry. Like, I'm so hungry, I'm going to stop at, whatever, and I'm going to get a burger. And it's like, oh, that's good. And an hour later, you're hungry again. You've met your caloric needs for the entire week,
right?
But you're starving again because you didn't meet your nutrient needs. That's like binging on social media. Additional hours actually make you lonelier, not less lonely, because you needed more oxytocin than you can possibly get from that medium. And you're crowding out actual in-person human time. So
is there anything that we can do that is remote, that is positive, like watching a comedy, or are there things that we can do that if we can't have that in-person time?
Right.
Are there positive things that we can do socially with others? Or
Well, yeah. So the degree of contact really matters. So phone is better than text, right? Zoom is better than phone. Right. So you get a simulacrum for the person. You get a little bit more oxytocin. You get a little bit closer to the experience. But anything that substitutes for in real life is a problem. Anything that complements in real life is great. Sometimes you're removed from your loved ones. It just has to happen sometimes. Okay, so use the technology, but don't ever let it substitute. Only complement. If you're going to use social media, make it a complement to your human relationships. Limit it to half an hour a day across all platforms added together. Don't use it on your phone. Use it on your laptop.
That's a great point.
And do it first thing in the morning, or sometime during. I don't use it first thing in the morning because of my routines, but use it in a particular time of the day that you schedule.
Right.
And use it to keep up with the people that you love. Then it can be a complement to your life, and it won't be detrimental to it. There's nothing wrong inherently with social media. The problem is the dose makes the poison.
Is it content-driven poison? Meaning my feed is pretty curated now on my Instagram. And when I go and I flip through the reels, I'm seeing a lot of funny movie clips that I just like. I was a fan of Leslie Nielsen back in the day, and some of the
He's the best.
And I'm just like, I see some of that shit, and
You're
I'm just dying laughing.
You're old enough that you can actually naturally curate Instagram, so that it's just amusing.
Right.
I get, for some reason, it feeds me videos of raccoons doing human-looking things. I
get poodles doing weird things.
Yeah. So apparently we all have our thing.
Yeah.
But we're old enough. I mean, because you're over 40.
Yeah.
That you're very unlikely to fall prey to the problem with a lot of these things, which is social comparison. So you're following people that you wish you were. Now, you're also in the enviable position of people wish they were you. So here's the problem. You're not super online. You have millions of followers on X. You have a lot of followers on X. People are following you on X because they want to be you. And that lowers their happiness. You're not trying to lower their happiness, but the social comparison, and I get it, aspiration is great, and you're virtuous, and you're doing cool things, and you're adding value to society, and so will they. But to the extent that social comparison is actually creeping in when they don't have in real life connections, that's going to lower their happiness.
I mean, that's part of the reason why I want to do stuff like this. And you got to this idea of serving other people. It's like one of the reasons I really enjoy doing podcasting is because I want to show people. I've done this on my entrepreneurial journey, trying to interview a lot of the big names in the past. Is like, everyone's just human, and we all got our shit.
Right.
Like, guess what? We're all fucked up. Like, like nobody is like, your book covers this where you're saying like, hey, you would think the person writing about happiness is like the happiest person in the world, but like you had your own shit too.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm like way below the happiness average. That's why I write about happiness.
Yeah.
Because I want to learn the skills. I mean, I'm a social scientist. I'm using it to, treat myself is what it comes down to. By the way, it's incredibly successful, and anybody can do this. But this is a point how can people who are very much in the public eye like you use social media? And one of the ways to do that is to be really authentic.
Yeah.
Not to be confessional. It's like, I had a bad thought.
Right.
That just becomes like, that it's exhibitionist, pornographic or something.
It's so funny. I just had Mark Manson on my podcast, and Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and he was talking about how there's like this idea of this almost like porn of like, take sympathy on me, let me tears are falling, let me get more followers this way.
Just the memoir era. Everybody's got to write a tell-all memoir about all the bad things that have happened to them, and that they've pushed through.
Right.
At the end of the day, they've been the perseverance has made them stronger people in the whole thing. But they did a whole lot of bad things.
Right.
And then they talk about their sins really, really publicly. That's just narcissism to a large extent.
Yeah.
But it's very different than it's like, things are good, and there's a lot of good that we can do, but don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. My life is a real life, right?
Yeah.
What did people never put on social media? Just had a knockdown, drag out argument with my wife.
Right.
Hashtag brutal.
Right.
My kid just flunked math again.
Right.
You don't put that stuff on there. And I'm not saying you necessarily should, but the sense of authenticity of a real life is quite
it's curated.
important.
Yeah. It's super curated.
Yeah.
Crazy. What do you think about some of your students coming to you? I'm sure you must have gotten this, doing psychedelics to try and increase happiness.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And it's a tricky subject, to be sure. You're a meditator. Yeah. And that's safe.
Yeah.
And
I did ketamine therapy, by the way.
You did?
I tried it.
How'd you find it?
I tried 6 doses of it. I was going through an insanely stressful startup. I felt very burnt out. And it wasn't like I didn't need this to like prevent suicide, thank God. Like it wasn't that type of treatment. But I had heard from several people really good things about it.
Right.
And I was like, hey, if I'm going to give it a shot, I might as well go in and give it like the full I watched actually a Huberman podcast about it. And I was like, okay, Huberman's got me enough convinced to go give this a try.
Right.
And I did it. And I thought it was really amazing. Like it definitely rebooted me in an interesting way.
Right.
And I haven't done it since, but it was a tool, one of probably many, but like, I don't know that.
Not a game changer, but productive.
Yeah. I mean, definitely helped during that period of life just to relax and just like let go of some things that I was hanging on to.
Right.
And kind of removes you a little bit from the situation so you could observe it and say, oh, I was like, the way I call it is like, the way I described it to a friend is that it's like ab day at the gym. You always hate ab day, but when you can see that there's been a 25-pound plate sitting on your chest the entire time you were doing abs and just remove it for a second, you're like, well, I'm still going through the hard work now, but it's a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
And so I felt a little bit of lightness to my step
I get it.
And a halo effect that got me to a good place. It was a bridge to a good place.
Okay,
which
so
was
it
great.
wasn't a super game changer, but you're glad you did it.
Yeah, I'm glad I did it. And I definitely think it was beneficial for that period of time. But, I'm also very skeptical. I've never done after my dad.
Psilocybin?
I did that after my dad died. Okay. And that was amazing.
Did you
I cried for
self-administer,
5. No, I had a real therapist with me. I mask everything, 5 grams of it. Cried for 5 hours after my dad had passed away. This was a decade ago, longer than that. And I thought that was amazing. So that was a real big, nice changing thing. I've never done anything else other than those 2 things.
No ayahuasca, no acid.
No, Tim's tried to talk me into ayahuasca a billion times, and I just I might have to mute that out. But
so there's more and more research on this, and I'm persuaded that in 5 or 10 years we're going to have really good protocols on this, but we don't yet.
Yeah,
we don't yet, which is one of the reasons that people are like, "What do you think?"
Right,
as opposed to going to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Okay, I think you should go, do peyote at this particular clinic. It's going to be really helpful to you."
Right.
We don't prescribe it in that particular way. And there's a lot that we don't know about pre-existing conditions. If you have mental illness in your family, not in your past, but in your family, what might it provoke? There's a lot of questions that we don't have answers
I've heard
to.
about
By the way, cannabis too.
Yeah.
No joke. I mean, there's a lot of people believe, really responsible researchers believe that cannabis can have unintended secondary consequences for people that have a tendency toward psychosis.
Yeah.
Or have psychosis in their family. I don't know. We just don't know yet. And so the result is I don't use any substances. The only substance I use is caffeine. Mm-hmm. I don't use any alcohol, and I just eat sometimes toxic food because I love sugar.
Yeah,
right? I'm not doing anything that's changing my psychology remarkably, putting me into an altered state. And frankly, I'm a little afraid to. I'm a little afraid to do this. I have a lot of mental illness in my family, not personally, but in my family. I really feel like I've dodged the bullet. And I want to keep dodging the bullet. I don't want to take chances is the way that this works. And if in 10 years the doctor's totally safe, I've got 46 studies, you can trust me on this, then I'll sort of entertain the notion perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a buddy that had a friend that just like you're saying, it ran in the family, and he did 5-MeO-DMT. And the guy was basically not right for about 3 months, in a really bad kind of check me into a clinic kind of way.
It was okay. He was using his MDMA.
No, DMT.
Oh, okay.
So the really hardcore psychedelic. And it's fascinating because I really like Michael Pollan's book and the work that he's done. I've had him on the podcast, and there's a lot.
It's terrific.
There's a lot of really interesting, but you're right. It's really early days. Yeah. And everyone's it's going to be dose dependent, set and setting, the person, their history, all of that you have to take into consideration.
And if you want to do that experiment, but treat it as an experiment.
Right.
Don't treat it as this is the be all and end all. This is settled science, because it's not. And if you're going to experiment, do it with your eyes open.
Right.
Do it in the spirit of experimentation and entrepreneurship on the enterprise of you. And if you don't do it, that's okay too.
Yeah.
The whole thing where it's just man, you're too square. No, there's all kinds of good reasons not to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, congratulations on the book.
Thanks.
And it's been so cool to see it be a bestseller. And how cool is it that Oprah is also on the cover with you?
She's awesome. She's been very helpful to me.
I bet. I mean, even obviously anyone that's watched her programming over the years, I really love the kind of spiritual path that she's been on. And she was the first one to introduce me to Eckhart Tolle. Yeah. And saying the power of living in this moment and the power of now was such a very important book.
Brought mindfulness to a lot of people.
Brought mindfulness to a lot of people. And for me, I'm curious, how does this idea of living in the present moment versus getting caught up about thoughts in the future or the past, how does that play into what you teach?
It's an important point. So humans are the only species that we know of that has time travel capabilities. So you can live in the present, you can live in the past, you can live in the future, you can rehearse future scenarios so you don't make actual mistakes. You can learn from your past and not remake errors by actually rerunning things that you did in the past and learning from your mistakes. And the truth is that time travel is so unbelievably powerful that most people spend most of their time not in the present. And that's a problem. Now, you don't want to spend all your time in the present because you'll keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and you'll do stupid things that you didn't think about. It's why didn't you think of that? Because you were not sufficiently prospective, which is future oriented. Why do you keep doing the same thing again and again? Because you're not sufficiently retrospective. You're not learning from your past. So you don't want to be 100% mindful. This idea, I'm going to live in the present every single second. That's insanity. You'd be doomed. But everybody actually should do it more than they do. And it's not natural. So my great mentor is Marty Seligman at Penn, who really created the field of positive psychology. And Marty Seligman says we shouldn't be called Homo sapiens. We should be called Homo prospectus, because we live in the future chronically. And the people who are listening to your podcast, they're very ambitious. They're strivers. They're going to be living excessively in the future. So you find that the average person is about 30 to 50% of their cycles of their time is going to be spent thinking about the future. When you put people in an fMRI machine and you tell them to think about nothing, it's like weird thing, like think about nothing.
Right.
They go to what's called the default mode network, which is a series of structures in the brain that make you think about the future. Think about nothing is the future. That's what you'll automatically do.
What about if you do that with a meditator, like a serious meditator that can actually tune that out and be here?
It's not clear we haven't actually done.
That would be
That would be a pretty interesting experiment to have the meditator working with you while you're in an fMRI. I don't know if you could actually get into the state because you'd be so distracted.
Or just get the meditator in the fMRI and do it on them and ask them to think about, I wonder how that compares.
That would be an interesting. So the strivers, on the other hand, are not 30 to 50%. It's probably 70 to 90% of their time. And so a lot of people are watching us are like, it's true. I'm missing my life. So a great book to read on this is Thich Nhat Hanh's famous The Miracle of Mindfulness.
I love that book.
It's his best book.
I gifted out a lot. It's 100% agree. It's his best book.
And it starts off with this famous description of washing the dishes.
Wash the dishes to wash the dishes.
To wash the dishes, because when you're not washing the dishes to wash the dishes, you're not authentically alive in this moment to wash the dishes. It's almost hypnotic to read the description of washing the dishes, and it makes you want to wash the dishes.
Yeah, it does.
Because you want to be alive. And here's the point. I wrote his obituary in the Washington Post when he died 2 years ago. And it was, I was rereading everything that I could find of Thich Nhat Hanh. And the truth is that people are missing their lives. They're not there for it. And they're not there for it because they're creating a future, which when they arrive in that now will be nothing more than a memory of a distant past. And that time travel can be a tyranny to most people. So working on a practice that will bring you back, even if it feels hard, even if it feels unnatural, is a very fruitful thing to do. That's what happens to me in Mass every morning.
That is that's like a way to bring you back. And
I finish the day with my wife. We pray together what's called the Rosary, which is 1,000-year-old meditative Catholic prayer. It's a repetitive prayer on prayer beads.
Yes.
So just like the Buddhist Rosary,
that I know,
which is more than 100 beads. This is one that actually will take you through a series of guided visualizations, scenes from the Bible, while you're repeating the same prayer hypnotically over and over and over again, and you're intensely present in those moments. I start the day mindfully. I end the day in the most intimate thing I can do with my wife, literally, which is praying together, enhanced joint metacognition together in a mindful state.
That's beautiful.
And it's a game changer. I've been married 33 years, and I'm looking forward to the next 33.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Anytime you can find a way to come together like that, especially on the spiritual realm, is like just a beautiful thing.
It's super important. People say, we got to figure out our relationship, to get more advice on our relationship. Pray together.
Yeah.
Pray together. If you're at all religious, and even if you're not, because what that will be is it's humiliating. It really is. And that's the reason that people will have sex but never pray together, because sex is less intimate than praying. I'll tell this to couples that are engaged. I'm like, you want to do the most intimate thing? They're like, oh, brother, what's Professor Brooks going to tell us now? It's like, pray.
Yeah. I mean,
it's all you, man. It's just like, no net. You're just doing it. I mean, if you can talk to the divine in front of your soulmate, it's pure power.
Yeah.
It's very raw.
That's super raw. That's the most kind of vulnerable you can be in front of someone.
Yep.
That's amazing. When an atheist comes up to you and says, I'm an atheist, how do I find something spiritual to go after? How do I check that box?
Yeah.
Not that it's a box to be checked, but
it is because it's one of the big four.
Yeah. Fill that bucket, I guess.
Fill that bucket with the transcendent. That means get small, man. Get small.
How can an atheist do that?
By studying the Stoic philosophers, by analyzing the fugues of Johann Sebastian Bach, by that hour Brahma Muhurta walk before dawn in the cold, in the dark, without your devices, by adopting a Vipassana meditation practice.
Watching a SpaceX launch, which I did the other day, which just absolutely blew my mind.
Mind-blowing. Look, that's Dacher Keltner, who teaches up at UC Berkeley. He's the world's leading expert in awe. AWE.
Love that. Yeah.
And he says, stand in awe and your life will change. Why? Because you get small.
Yeah.
And the universe gets big. And that's really what transcendence is all about. Now, religion is very efficacious in doing this because as a matter of routine makes it so you're good at doing that. Mm-hmm. And the same thing is having a technique. Yeah. Right. And I'm not reducing faith to technique. I mean, I believe in God. Yeah. And I believe he loves me. But I also understand that the technique is important and does all kinds of incredible neurological things to you that are unsubstitutable. There's a neuroscientist at Columbia, you probably know, Lisa Miller, and she wrote a book called The Awakened Brain. She's an observant Jew, and she has looked with her work at the unique experiences that are almost impossible to have in your life in the absence of religious experiences, of religious phenomena, spiritual phenomena, and parts of the brain that are basically inaccessible, which is really important. And again,
so they only light up when you have some type of religious experience?
That's what she finds in her work.
Wow.
That's what she finds in her work. Yeah. These parts of the brain are just dark.
And they're just like waiting there to be unlocked.
Maybe the Stoics will let you do that. I don't know. I do know that people will have transcendent experiences with deep work on the philosophers. Deep work on looking at great genius or acts of incredible virtuousness from other people. That will bring you out of yourself in the same way. The question is whether or not you can routinize that you can turn it into a practice sufficiently so that you can experience it every day, and you need to experience it every day.
Yeah. A couple last questions for you. I know you're a busy guy. Wanted to ask you about finances, because a lot of people watch this and say, okay, great, two, well-to-do white guys up here telling me that money doesn't matter and, that you don't need that to be happy. Yeah. I would say my own experience, I declared bankruptcy in 2002 because I had a medical operation that wasn't covered, had a bunch of bills. It was horrible. 7 years of hell. Yeah. I've been there when my car was repossessed. I've been there when a bunch of shit went wrong, and thankfully dug my way out of it and all is well. But I will say that there's this point where, at least in the United States, where you get to a certain income bracket and life does get easier. Yep. And I would say I did struggle a lot more until you get to a certain place. Let's call it 6 figures in the United States, right? Is there a certain amount of money that you have to make, or that if you do make that, you do get some relief, get a little bit more happiness because life gets easier? Yeah.
So it's a great question, and it has an answer. Believe it or not, it's been studied a lot. This is the first question I studied as an economist interested in happiness.
Okay, great. Okay. Awesome.
So the big misconception is that you get happier when you have more money. That's not true. You get less unhappy. Money eliminates sources of unhappiness. That's what money does.
So unpack that a little bit, because people typically think of it as a seesaw between happiness and unhappiness.
But it's not. Happiness and unhappiness are produced literally in different parts of the brain.
See, that's what's so crazy is everyone thinks if you have more happiness, you have less unhappiness.
That's totally incorrect. So for you and me, as mad scientists, we have 3 helpings of both. That's how mad scientists actually are. But you think that when I feel less unhappiness, that means I'm feeling more happiness. That's wrong. And you can make all kinds of wrong decisions in your life. People say, I'll be a lot happier if I have a shorter commute to work. No, you'll be less unhappy, because a commute is a source of aggravation, which raises your unhappiness, right? Happiness comes from faith, family, friends, and work. Unhappiness is a whole different set of sources. Deprivation, barriers to the sources of unhappiness, chronic aggravations, seeing people that you love with a lack of access to the things that they need. These are sources of unhappiness, and money's very good for wiping those things out up to a certain point. So, for example, you find that you can pretty much wipe out your need for adequate health care and calories when you get to $75,000 a year, which is why Kahneman and Deaton, the 2 Nobel Prize winners in economics, had that famous paper 20 years ago that shows that $75,000 is the satiation point, beyond which people keep rating their life as better, but they don't feel better. Gotcha. Their well-being actually.
So that's probably higher. 120 now or so?
It's probably, and it depends on where you are. I mean, we're in, LA, which means it's more than that.
Yeah.
Right? And some people have found that it's more like 250 or 300, but the whole point is that's what the satiation is doing.
Understood.
Okay, so here's the problem. Here's the tyranny. Here's the trap. When I was in my 20s, I was a French horn player. I made my living from 19 to 31 as a French horn player. I never studied. I never went to college until I was much later. And I wasn't making very much money. I didn't go to the dentist between the ages of 19 and 25 because I didn't have the money. I didn't have health care. I didn't have coverage. Now, I didn't go a day without cigarettes. So, priorities during that time, right? Okay. But when I went to the dentist at 25, I had a bunch of cavities and he fixed them and I felt better. And I concluded that money bought happiness. Because I can't do the sums in my head where I'm distinguishing between happiness and unhappiness. I just knew I felt better. And so I calculated that, money's going to make me feel better. And if I'm not serious and careful, I'm going to chase that feeling for the rest of my life. See, what happens when people always want more and more and more is they're doing chasing behavior. Chasing behavior is in the gambling literature. You're a Las Vegas guy. So what'll happen is you lose a little bit and then you chase to try to get it back.
Right.
And
you double down.
People, With money, it's the same thing. With drugs, it's the same thing. I want that bump of cocaine that feels like the first bump that I had, right? And that chasing behavior is what people will do for the rest of their life. Yeah, well, okay, going from $600,000 to $700,000 was, okay, it didn't give me the satisfaction I thought I was going to get, but $800,000, then I'm going to get it because I remember that feeling and I want that old feeling back of relief. That's what that happens. Okay,
and you're saying because like the money, it can eliminate some of these things in that bucket of unhappiness,
but not
then it
over
stops.
low levels.
Right.
Not over low levels.
Right.
There are, however, now the cheat code. Everything is that. First is the theory and the basics, right? Then it's the workaround, right? Here's the workaround. There's 5 things you can do with money. The thing you want to do with it won't bring happiness. The 4 things you're less likely to do with it will bring happiness. Okay. So number 1, buy stuff. The Daytona, the Rolex, right? You think it's going to bring you happiness. It brings you momentary satisfaction that does not endure. Right? Okay. But you don't know that because Mother Nature's lying to you again and again and again. Here are the 4 things that you can't do. This is an exhaustive list of what you can do with money. Buy stuff, buy time, buy experiences, give it away, save it. Those are the 5 things you do with money. There's nothing else you can do with it, basically. I suppose set it on fire, right? Whatever. Let's not do that. The other 4 that are not buying the Rolex Daytona, I got nothing against the Daytona, by the way, but the other 4 will actually bring satisfaction that endures. Buy experiences with people you love.
Yes.
Right? When I was 1 year married, 32 years ago, my wife Esther and I were having this huge fight. How should we spend our first wedding anniversary, right? Ironically, we had no money. I mean, we were poor. She was working a minimum wage job. She didn't speak English yet. We were living in Florida. We had just immigrated from Spain. I was making nothing as a French horn teacher. And we had enough money either to go to the beach for 3 days or buy a couch. And we didn't have a couch. And we needed a couch. So she's like, we go to the beach because she's from Barcelona. She's Spanish. And I'm like, no, we should buy a couch because I'm a thrifty, practical American, right? Beach, couch, beach. So finally we compromised and went to the beach. And, that's why I've been married 30 years.
Exactly.
But the point is, she was right because we got a couch 6 months later and I don't remember it.
Yeah.
I remember everything on that beach vacation because we spent it in love. You think things are permanent and experiences are evanescent. The truth is that experiences are permanent. They lodge in your heart and mind, and your things are impermanent. Right. That's number 1. 2, buy time. Spread the love, create a job. You don't want to do something, you got the money, pay somebody to do it. That is an extraordinarily good thing to do. We have this stupid idea in the United States that it's undignified for me to have somebody cut my yard, as if I'm too important to have somebody cut my yard. Create a job and pay them fairly. Pay somebody $25 an hour to clean your house. Don't exploit them. That's the point. Then use the time with the people you love. Don't fritter it away on Instagram.
Right. That's the key piece because it's so easy to hire someone to do something and then just
screw it around.
Dig around.
Yeah. 4th is give your money away. Find things you really care about and give them your money. And 5th, I'm going to sound like Dave Ramsey now, save your money. Save your money. It's intensely gratifying. The number 1 way that you can use money and have it bum you out is by borrowing it. Credit card debt will reliably lower your happiness. Car debt will lower your happiness. The only kind of debt that kind of doesn't hurt your happiness is mortgage debt because that's progress. It's better than rent. You're getting there's a little bit of progress in each check,
Right.
shockingly little.
Plus, you can probably put your money to work somewhere else that's getting more than your, well, not these days with interest rates, but you used to be able to.
But save your money. Save your money, because humans get happiness from progress.
Yeah.
We don't get it from getting to our goals. It's progress toward our goals. That's how humans are wired. And saving is progress. So those are the 4 things to do. If you want your money to buy happiness, do those 4 things.
That's amazing. That's sound advice. One thing I want to ask you a question on. You had a article that said how to stand in line and not get bored.
Yeah. Well,
what was that all about?
So I hate to wait.
Yeah.
You do too, guaranteed.
Yeah.
Hate waiting, right? I will go to almost any length to not wait. So I've been on the road since I was 19. At first as a musician, now I'm on the road 48 weeks a year doing speeches and doing this workshops and stuff, teaching. So I hate eating in restaurants because all it is waiting. You go into a restaurant, you wait for the menu, then you wait to make your order, and then you wait for the food, and then you wait for the check. I mean, it's just all waiting, and it drives you mad. So I go into restaurants, and when I get my food, I ask for the check. Will you please bring me my food and the check? Why? Because then it's more on my time. I do crazy stuff like that. If there's an airport program that will shave 1 minute off a line, I don't care how much it costs. I'm in.
So you're a member of like all the line skipping one,
everybody
the clear
hates
and
me in the airport, right? So I started to look at it. Look, what is it all about? And the answer is it's a pathology. It's a pathology thinking that if you don't wait, you'll somehow use your time better. That's actually not the case. You need time to be bored. You need time to actually wait. Now, the best way to take waiting time and truly waste it and get yourself less happy is looking at your phone. Because what it shows, what the research shows very clearly, is time spent on your phone will make you more bored. You'll be more occupied and distracted, but more bored in the end.
After you're done? Because like if I'm at the DMV and I'm looking at Instagram, that's better than just sitting there at the DMV.
It's not.
Why is it not?
It's not, because what's happening is you're wasting your bored time. So there's a great guest for you for the show, Ellen Langer. She's the first woman ever to be tenured in psychology at Harvard. She actually brought the concept of mindfulness to the West. She wrote a book called Mindfulness decades ago. And she says that mindfulness practice is when you're sitting on the train, folding your hands in your lap, and looking out the window and paying attention to what's happening.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
You have an opportunity when you're at the DMV to look at what's going on,
right?
To pay attention. So it's not just,
right,
so stupid, I hate it, this is the worst, bureaucracy, government. No. It's like, watch what's happening. Pay attention to the lights. Look at people's behavior. Smell that weird DMV smell. Be fully alive. Wash the dishes when you're washing the dishes. You actually can practice mindfulness, or you can waste it. And that's what we don't do. And after a little while, what happens, according to Ellen, and she's recommended this to me, and I can vouch for this, you start looking forward to those weird things. You start looking forward to those moments. I was like,
what can I see that no one else is seeing?
Yeah, and when I'm going to go be bored now. Right? And then you stop taking your device in.
Yeah.
That's a mark of courage in our society today, is to leave your device in the car when you actually go into the DMV and say, I'm going to experience the DMV today.
Yeah. That's crazy talk.
Crazy. It's complete craziness, right?
Yeah.
And yet we need it. We're wired to experience the DMV, not to scroll through Instagram.
Yeah.
That's making us nuts, literally making us nuts, is to be distracted this whole time. We're rewiring our brains from what they're supposed to be. You know, you notice that on the Pleistocene, hunters would be looking into the horizon in an unfocused way. This is one of the reasons that this will give you intense calm and satisfaction, to go out, look at a sunset over a pastoral setting and unfocus your eyes on the horizon. And you'll weirdly start feeling better because you're wired to do this. This is how you take in the entire environment and see what exactly you want to go run after and kill.
Right.
Okay, so why would you rewire your brain around next?
Right.
It's unnatural.
Right. Plus, it's giving you, like, and tell me how closely this is linked to true science, but one of the things that I always think about with social media is that the algorithms are so good that there is this delivery of the best moment of your life every time you flip. Like if you think about when we used to have fun with our friends, like our friends would make us laugh out loud like a few times a week, right? And you would just be like, that was the funniest thing. And it was so much fun. You were there. It was the moment, and it cemented that thing, like you said, in real life, the moment that you have with your friends. And now I'm being served these moments of outrageous humor and the best possible thing to make me laugh over and over and over again. And then when I walk away from it, I'm like, well, wait a second.
I know.
Like I was enjoying that.
Right.
I want more of that because that was the best moment. Those used to happen twice a week, and now they're happening every 2 minutes.
Totally. I mean, you're getting the most potent Coke in the world.
Yeah.
Like bump.
Yes, bump. Yeah.
Right. And you're not happier. And the reason you're not happier is because the whole dopamine system in your brain gives you the anticipation of these rewards. And the rewards are now so great that when you don't get those rewards, the anticipation that's not met actually makes you profoundly frustrated, uncomfortable, and disappointed.
Can boredom reset that?
Oh, yeah. So the Anna Lemke, who's a physician, teaches at Stanford Medical School. She's the world's leading expert on dopamine resets. She wrote a very good book called Dopamine Nation. Anna Lemke is super interesting because she talks about all these people who have these different kinds of dopamine abuse strategies and that are making us into like cocaine monkey.
Yeah.
There's these experiments in the 50s, right? Before you had animal abuse. IRB, it wouldn't let you do this stuff. But they would basically let monkeys self-administer cocaine. And they would, within a day, be sitting in front of the lever, hitting the lever over and over and over again until they died, right? No sex, no sleep, no food, no water, until they died, which is basically like being an author and refreshing the Amazon page.
Yeah, exactly. Same.
It's like when the week that your book comes out.
Yeah.
And so we've all become cocaine monkey with these technologies. And what you need to do if you're going to have a functional life is you need to detox. You need to detox. You need to reset your brain, and you absolutely can. She has a protocol in Dopamine Nation where you can reset your brain, but you have to do what you think you got to do, which is you got to cleanse, and you have to step away from the device.
Yeah,
stop administering this constant stream of unsatisfying dopamine that has this anticipation of reward over and over and over again. That's wrecking your life and distracting you from the things you really care about.
I did a 7-day silent Zen meditation retreat not too long ago.
Yeah, how'd it go?
3 days is what it takes.
Yeah.
Until my body was like, I'm okay without the phone today.
Yeah.
I think it's a full 3 days, and it's legit.
Totally.
And I'm like pretty conscious of what I'm doing on the phone. I can only imagine for a teen that's grown up in this environment. Yeah. Have you ever considered writing a book to help like teens?
That's my next book.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's actually for young adults. It's called All Things New. How to start all the things you need to start.
That's amazing. When does that come out?
It's going to come out on graduation day 2026 or maybe earlier. Cool. And so it's going to be a little while. I'm working on it. I was working on it on the plane today, as a matter of fact. But the first chapter is tomorrow morning. It's called Tomorrow Morning. How are you going to start tomorrow morning? And it's going to talk about how do you start a relationship that can endure? How are you going to start a job that you might love? How can you move to a place and actually move in a way that's healthy? How do you start things is what it comes down to. And a lot of it is actually about restarting. When you have unhealthy habits that have artificially hopped up your dopamine system to the point where you're distracted from everything and satisfied by nothing, which is really what the technology is trying to do. How do you reset? How do you reset? There's going to be a lot of that
needed.
in there. Yeah. And I actually recommend to my students and to everybody what you just said, a silent retreat. I go on a silent retreat every year, and it's a strong recommend. You need it. Everybody needs a silent retreat.
Yeah.
You need time of contemplation and prayer and just not talking and not being stimulated. There will be children screaming in your head.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
It's brutal.
But then it stops. And when it stops, that's like the Brahma Muhurta of an hour and a half before dawn, when things are dark and cold and you can hear the crunching of the rocks under your feet.
Yeah.
That's magic.
Do you have any recommendations for parents out there that are trying to raise conscious kids that are not addicted to technologies, or any books that you like?
Yeah, so John Haidt's new book about the anxious generation is a super good one. Why? Because it's like cold water in your face. It just shows you that you're making a big mistake if you say, I'm going to protect my kids from the child molesters by not letting them walk to the store which is safetyism and hurting them. And I'm going to let the child molesters climb in through their cell phone into their bedroom while they're alone. That we're doing exactly the wrong thing. And so it's a splash of water on the face of a lot of people who are doing exactly the wrong thing of what they should do. The second thing that I always talk about with young parents is they don't care what you say. They're not going to listen. You have to model exactly what you want to see. If you don't want your kids to be screwing around on their phones at dinner, you put your phone away and you're not looking at it and you're having a conversation with them at dinner. And it won't work right away, but that model really works. If you want your kids to practice the faith, you must practice the faith. If you don't want your kids to drink, you shouldn't drink. If you don't want your kids to be abusive, yelling taunts out the car window in traffic, you better never do that.
Right.
You better live thinking, I'm going to live as if I were the man I want my son to be. That's how you live. And that's what really matters.
That's beautiful. That's well said. One last question before I let you go. Someone's watching this and they're saying, I'm having a really shitty day. We all wake up on the wrong side of the bed every once in a while.
Yeah.
Is there any go-tos that you have that are just kind of like, okay, how can I just knock myself loose a little bit here? Like peel off some of this nasty feeling. Yeah. What can people do if they're stuck?
Number one, move your body. That's really, really important.
Get outside, go for
a walk.
Yeah.
Get outside and go for a walk. And walk, I'm not talking about 5 minutes, at least 30 minutes, and go for a walk without your device. And say, I'm walking now. I'm washing the dishes. I'm walking.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, I recommend that you lean in to this thing that you're feeling, that you don't run away from it. Don't treat yourself. There's nothing broken about you because you're having a crummy day. You're actually alive. You're alive. And so how do you remind yourself that you're actually alive? Write down the 5 things that are bothering you today. Why? Because you want to lean into them and understand these things. Like, this is a very interesting phenomenon. This is a very interesting feeling. I'm having aversive emotions because my limbic system is sensing something that could be a threat to me. What actually is that? Is it real? Is it not real? Write it down. You're going to learn about yourself in an intensely interesting and satisfying way. Third, write down the things you're actually grateful for. Because no matter, everybody listening to us has all kinds of things to be grateful for. Like, I don't know, living in America.
Yeah, clean drinking water, hopefully.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's not good all the time, but there's plenty of things for us to be grateful for. We have a negativity bias that's an evolved state. Negative emotions dominate because they keep us alive. Positive emotions are subordinate because they're nice to have. So therefore, we're always going to look at the negative side of everything. That's a normal thing. If you're at a party and somebody's smiling sweetly at you, that's nice.
Yeah.
If they're frowning at you, pay attention, because that might be a big problem for you out on the street outside the party. That's why we always focus on these negative things, especially on bad days. Artificially, you can manually torque the attention that you have toward the things that are reality, that you have more to be grateful for than grumpy about. And the way that you do that is by keeping your gratitude list. So
is it just reviewing that stuff? Like going in, that can help? Like,
oh my gosh, it's huge. So there's good data on this that shows that if you keep a gratitude list and update it Sundays and review it all throughout the week, by about 10 weeks, you'll be something like 12% happier.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it's tangible.
That's not nothing.
That's
nothing. Double digits.
And then the day you start is the best day you do it too. So number one, walk. Number two, list the thing and study yourself. What is actually behind this with fascination. And number three, keep a gratitude list, and your day is going to change.
I love that. Fantastic. Can you tell us real quickly about the book?
Yeah, Build the Life You Want. It was Oprah Winfrey's idea. She reads my column. I have a column that comes out every Thursday morning in the Atlantic called How to Build a Life, about the science of happiness. She was reading it all the way through the coronavirus epidemic. I did not know. I mean, there's 500,000 of my closest friends read the column. Turns out one is Oprah Winfrey. She called me. She's like, this is Oprah Winfrey. And
you're like, bullshit.
I'm like, yeah, this is Batman. You know?
Exactly.
And I went on her book podcast because she read the book that came before this, which is called From Strength to Strength, Happiness, Purpose, and Deep Success in the Second Half of Life. It was for strivers. I went on her book podcast and we did a little television show together. And she said, if I still had my TV show, she says, I had a show, right? I'm aware you had a show. It was the most famous show in America. If I had my show, I'd have you on 30 times. And you'd be known by all the people I want to know your work. But I don't have a show, so how about if I host a book? I said, what does that mean? She said, I don't know. And so I went to her place right up the coast here from where we are here in California. And we cooked up a book And I started writing chapters and sending them to her, and she wrapped material around them. This is a really interesting topic, and this thing happened to me, and here's why you should listen to this. And so the book is, the science is me, and it's hosted by Oprah.
Yeah.
And it was her idea.
It's cool because
really
on the
grateful for her.
audiobook, she jumps in and actually has some commentary in here as well,
like the
which
show.
is pretty awesome.
Just like the show.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a really great experience. And she's become somebody who's very important to me in my life.
Yeah, I have no doubt because like it's something you can just tell she's a good human and by the way that she carries herself.
She's the real deal.
Yeah.
She's the same in private or under dinner table as she is in public on TV.
Yeah.
She has an incredible equanimity about understanding that the rewards that she's gotten in life on the earthly plane are nothing more than an opportunity for her to use them in service of other people, to lift them up and bring them together.
I mean, that goes back to one of your pillars here around service.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. She lives it.
Amazing. Well, Arthur, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
I really loved being with you. Thanks.
Yeah, it was great.
Right on.